Let's talk about exercise 8.3, AverageTempEnhanced. So AverageTempEnhanced is going to be a program that's based on the previous exercise, AverageTemp. The only thing is that we're going to be replacing some of the for loops within it with an enhanced for loop. We're already familiar with our regular classic for loops, which generally have three parts. The initializer, right here, the condition statement, which is the second part, and then how we're going to change the initializer value. So here we're incrementing. So we can actually shorten this to the enhanced version, our enhanced for loop, which I read as for each something and something. Let's see what that means. So this enhanced for loop right here, this that I've highlighted, is actually the same thing as the classic for loop above here. So what this is saying is that for each temp, each value that we're calling temp, in the array temperatures, we're going to do something. So notice how we don't have to start it off with an initial value of 0. It'll automatically start from the left-hand side, which would be index value 0. We don't have to check to see if we are still within the range of the array, because this is simply going to terminate when we don't have any more values or elements left in the array itself. And we also don't have to increment by 1 because it's just going to go one by one from left to right. Notice that we do have to declare the data type that we're of each element in the array. So since this is an array of temperatures that we've specified as doubles, we declare the element variable temp as a double. So this is saying for each temperature, which is a double, within the array of temperatures, we're going to do something. Much simpler than writing out this larger for loop. But these larger for loops, the classic for loops, still have their merit. They still have their use depending on what you want to do. And we'll actually see that in this exercise. So in this exercise, we're editing our original average temp, calling it now AverageTempEnhanced. So go ahead and save that as a copy named AverageTempEnhanced. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a look inside at our three different for loops that we've coded in here and seeing which ones we can replace with our enhanced for loops. Now I'm going to tell you that two of the for loops in the original code can be replaced by enhanced for loops. The other one could also, but because of something that we're relying on index values to print out the day's temperature, we cannot replace it with an enhanced for loop. So in other words, if you need to access an array's index value, either to print it out or do some sort of calculation, then you need to use the classic 3-port for loop. Now if the index value does not matter to you and you don't need to print it out or use it in any calculation, you can get away with the enhanced version. So let's take a look at the for loops that we already have in here. We have our first for loop here, which comes right after we create our array. Remember, we created our array when we initialized it. It was initialized to the default value of doubles, which were 0.0s. But we didn't want an array filled with 0.0s. We wanted to prompt a user to give us a number of days' temperatures. And when we were prompting the user to do that, we were printing out the number of day. So first it would prompt the user with day 1's temperature and then day 2's up until the number of days the user had specified. And because we were doing that, we thought that it would be useful to utilize the array's index value in order to calculate which day we were prompting the user for. And because arrays start at 0, we use this expression here, I plus 1, so that we could start at day 1 and then progress from day 2 all the way to the number of day that the user specified. So if the user specified that they would be entering 5 days worth of temperatures, it would finally prompt the user for day 5 and then exit out of this loop. So because this for loop depends on the index value of the array, We don't necessarily want to replace this for loop with an enhanced for loop. So we want to keep this one the same. However, the second and third for loops don't necessarily rely on the index value. We see here that within the calculate average method, this for loop iterates or traverses the array, accesses every element within it in order to calculate a sum of each of those values. Because the index value does not necessarily matter, we can actually replace this for loop with an enhanced for loop. So in order to do this, we're going to go ahead and delete the inside of this parenthesis for this for loop. And we're going to replace it now for, we got to specify the data type that the array holds. So for every double that we're going to call temp, within our array temperatures with an S, we're going to give a value to sum. Okay, so remember this is shorthand for sum equals sum plus temperatures sub I. But we're not using our index value of I anymore. That's no longer in this for loop, so we can't reference this anymore. So what do? Well, we can use this variable temp instead. So we simply just change the temperature sub I to temp, which is going to change at each iteration of this enhanced for loop. So on the first iteration, temp is going to be the first or zeroth element in the array. And it's going to grab that value and it's going to add that value to our variable sum. Then it's going to go up, and as long as there's more elements in that array, it's going to tack the value of that element onto sum by adding it. So let's go on and look at our third for loop. Our third for loop, it looks like it is telling the number of elements in this array that happen to be above the calculated average, which was returned back here in calculate average. So again, it does not seem like we're depending on the element's index position in this array. So it seems like we can replace this classic for loop with an enhanced for loop. So again, we can get rid of what's within the parentheses here. And again, we can use basically the same thing that we did up here. For every double that we're going to call temp in the array called temperatures, which again, we have passed as a parameter here so we can reference it, we are going to check to see if that temp, remember we can replace this temperature sub I since we're no longer using it in the traditional for loop. We can use this variable temp. If temp is greater than the average, we're going to go ahead and add 1 to that total that we specified here. And it should work virtually the same way. So I'm going to go ahead and compile that. Seems to have compiled with no problems. So now we can go ahead and check our work. Okay, so let's give it 7 different temperatures. Day 1 is going to be 90 degrees, 88 for day 2, 70 degrees for day 3, 75 for day 4, 100 for day 5, 90 again for day 6, and then let's have a weird one, 50 degrees for day 7. Okay, so this has calculated the average temperature of about 80.4, and it's saying that there's 4 above average. Let's see if that's true. 90 is above average, 100 is, 88, and 90. So that is 4 different days above average. That is correct. So that is kind of an easier way to iterate through or to traverse through an array without having to do a 3-part for loop instead using an enhanced for loop here. So now all you have to do is go through your journal questions, make sure you explain how enhanced for loops are useful, and explain why you could not use an enhanced for loop for this first for loop up here.